I'm Sue Fullerton, and this is News 6. This week, the program has been prepared by the students of St. Peter's in Huron, Ohio. Today, we'll be bringing a story about a man who collects buffalo, a story of a town rebuilding, and a story about a park almost completely surrounded by water. But our lead story is on Lake Erie. The town of Huron lies on the coast of Lake Erie, and we depend on the lake for everything from swimming to drinking. Physically, the lake is 210 feet deep, 241 miles long, and covers 9,940 square miles. But there have been problems. In 1949, 7 million pounds of fish were caught, but in 1965, the catch had decreased to 6,000 pounds of white fish. Members of our class researched the problem. One classmate, Wendy Westhoven, had a chance to talk to Dr. Kenneth Hill, Associate Professor of Biology at Firelands campus of Bowling Green State University. Wendy asked the doctor if Lake Erie had been dead.
Well, Wendy, that's a very popular misconception that a body of water can be totally dead. Lake Erie has never been dead. In fact, it's probably more productive now than it ever was. The productivity, however, is not always what mankind wants for productivity. Very often, a body of water is over-fertilized, and Lake Erie is probably in that condition where it has a high degree of fertilization and many, many organisms living in it, but not necessarily the organisms we most desire.
Wendy also asked Professor Hill if the industries were doing anything to clean up the lake.
Well, that's kind of a broad question. I would say generally, yes. The industrial community has abated pollution at a higher percent than most of the municipalities and the agricultural community. The reason they can afford to do it is because they can afford to pass on the cost of pollution abatement into the product. There are still, however, many basic industries that are rather slow in the pollution abatement. There are now government incentives to tax write-offs for abating pollution. Some industries have taken advantage of it and some have not.
We want to thank Dr. Hill for his time and information, but the investigation didn't stop there. Here's Kathy Obringer with more.
Thank you, Sue. We also looked at the procedure that the water from the lake had to go through to be used by the citizens of Huron. To find out, Sue Fullerton and I went to the water filtration plant and talked to Mr. Leonard Dirks, who explained the system to us.
What minerals and how much is put in the water?
We have alum, lime, carbon, fluoride, and chlorine.
Where is it put in?
In the upstairs of this building, there's 2 hoppers for the lime and alum, which go into the water at the time the raw pump is pumping. Also, the same time the chlorine is fed. Next.
Would you briefly explain the process?
Well, first of all, we have a crib out in the lake, which is approximately 2,200 feet, which comes in to a well on the bank, and then this gravity flow into the plant, which is called one of the settling basins. Then from there, it is pumped from the raw water pumps up through the settling basins, and then into the filters, and then from the filters, it goes into the settling basins for the clear well, and there it is run or pumped out to the water mains into the distribution system.
We especially asked if there were any changes in this filtration because of Lake Erie.
Yes, whenever we have a northeastern or we have a rain off of the mainland, that is what's the difference, makes a difference in the poundage of usage of different chemicals. As the dirty water comes in, we have to use more chemicals to clear it up.
We thank Mr. Dirks for his time and information. But the lake is also a resource for the community of Huron, because it makes our community a shipping port, which exports to foreign countries around the world. One of the major companies is Pillsbury. You can watch them unload the trucks full of grain, and then you can see them loading the ships. The farmers get receipts like these, which can be cashed in. The trucks are weighed, then unloaded, and weighed again to find the weight of the grain. Here in the port has led to changes here in the community. Here's Suzette Glabe to tell you about some of them.
Thank you, Kathy. Huron is unusual. In that way, we have no downtown. But this is just part of the overall changes coming to our city. Downtown was torn down as part of the urban renewal plan of Huron, but there are pieces now coming back with roads, curves, and lights now in place. But in the meantime, Huron shoppers have turned to the Huron Plaza. Mr. Hamble, who manages the plaza, decided to get involved because he knew that urban renewal was coming back to Huron. With the plaza having around 70,000 square feet, Mr. Hamble had to get agreements with the various merchants who are already in the plaza, as well as those he wanted to get in. He said he had to have a bankable deal to make the plaza a success. Another change in Huron, which came from the urban renewal, was the new boat basin. City manager of Huron, Scott R. Hedrick, told us that the cost of the boat basin was $1,200,000 and was built in part of the old downtown area. But the basin was not yet finished. An office, showers, and even deeper canal than the present 12 feet are being added. Another change in Huron is the new park, which is being built off the pier on Lake Erie. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is in charge of this $5 million project, which they expect to be finished in 10 years. This 64-acre park is a metal frame filled with lake and river dredgings, and it is hoped that this park will cut down water pollution on the bottom of Huron River and Lake Erie. Now over to Brett Kingill to tell you more about Huron.
Thank you, Suzette. Prior to the Civil War, Huron was part of the system of homes and sanctuaries for escaped slaves that made up the Underground Railroad. Jabez Wright owned land on the coast of Lake Erie, which let him hide blacks until they were able to get to Canada and be free. His home, barn, and other parts of his property had tunnels and sanctuaries for the escaped slaves to evade the slave hunters. The present owner of the property, Mr. George R. Maddy, showed us the main sanctuary, which was 12 feet by 12 feet and 7 feet high. But the Underground Railroad is not the only part of history in Huron. Just east of Huron are acres of woodlands dedicated to an American symbol, the buffalo. One of our classmates, Barb Van Gilder, got a chance to talk to Ed Otto, who owns the land and tends the animals.
How did you get started with buffaloes?
Oh, I've always been interested in conservation, and we got the first ones from the Cashy Mountain Game Reserve in Oklahoma 10 years ago.
What do you have to do to keep buffalo?
They have to have water, pasture, and in the wintertime, if the ground is covered, then we feed them hay and some grain.
How many buffalo do you have now?
40.
What further plans are in the future for the buffalo?
Well, we're continually building the herd up to about 50 to 75, and then we sell them for breeding and meat purposes.
Now back to Sue for an editorial.
Before we leave, we'd like to say a few words about the tracks of the Penn Central Railroads. We would like to suggest that they look into replacing some of the tracks which cause problems. A good example are those which are loose on State Route 61. They are so loose that the trains must slow to 30 miles an hour, which in turn slows the cars, which must wait for the trains to pass. We're sure this example could be repeated in many other areas. From the students and teachers of the St. Peter's School, that's news from Huron, Ohio. Have a good day.